What is up? 10 weeks down. If you're playing redraft fantasy football, that gives you about 4 weeks to secure a playoff spot, hopefully try to win a little money. But why wait? In DFS, you can win money this week, and you can play all the way through week 18 when the guys who are playing who nobody's heard of, we're going to be here to give you great fantasy advice. In fact, we're going to do that for week 11 right now. Let's build some lineups. What is up? Good evening, morning, afternoon, whenever you watch this show. Happy Friday. Welcome to the DFS Academy. I am your host, Ryan Weisse. With me, as always, Austin Amandolia. Austin, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, although I hate to correct you right off the bat, but my article does go through the Super Bowl, so technically you have even more opportunities to play DFS with us.
No, I love that you correct me. I was talking specifically about the show, but you are right. Club Fantasy DFS, first of all, we're still going to have shows. You're just not going to see my face. Let me make this very clear to people. Josh, I hope you're listening. I'm done at week 17. I need my time off. I don't do a lot, but I do enough. Week 17 is a wrap for me, folks. So you're going to get Austin. Austin usually breaks down the playoff matches in individual videos because he's awesome and far more dedicated than I am. So you're going to get Austin. You ain't getting me. Week 17, it's a wrap for this face, except for our Wednesday show. You can always catch me on Wednesdays, but DFS Academy is going to go through week 18. So I'm lying already. I'll be here for DFS Academy. I don't leave Austin until the full season's over, regardless, great Thursday night game that we're turning in for right now, though the Eagles start off down 7-0 off of a great pass from Jaden Daniels to Austin Eckler, finished off by Brian Robinson. That's not what I was expecting from this one, Austin. I looked at the defensive matchup, and I thought the Eagles were going to run away, and the Commanders are making me look like idiots. So,
yeah, I mean, these Thursday night games, they've been throwing us for a loop here recently. The favorite team has not been doing so hot lately.
That's such a good point. And then the other thing is, like, now this one's still, I just double checked the score because I had a second. It's still 7-0. But I think back to last Thursday, it was 7-0 at the end of the first quarter. And man, did we get a lot more scoring than that after that. So I'll be interested to see how this one shakes out. But the Commanders are in charge as we are recording our episode. But that's not why any of you are here. You are here for some DFS picks. If you've never tuned into the DFS Academy before, let me get a little housekeeping out of the way. We are going to start the show by talking about Austin's cash picks. That is his forte. That's what his article is about. If you are here to build your bankroll, take down those head-to-heads, that's the first part of the show. The second part of the show, I get a little bit more involved. We talk about our favorite tournament plays, though I will point out Austin's better at that than me too. I'm here for the anecdotal evidence, usually giving you the wrong pick. Last week, and we're going to talk about this in a second, most of Austin's picks were the ones that you wanted to take advantage of. If you would like to play DFS with us, not just hear about DFS, I encourage you to check the links in the description of this video and in Austin's article that drops every Saturday. We have contests that go on DraftKings and FanDuel. They're a little $2 contests just for fun, but the winner gets announced at the end of the show, so you maybe get to hear your name. If you're able to take us down, I promise you it is not the host winning every week. It's usually one of our fans, and we have a great time doing it. Also, like, subscribe, do all those things that content creators tell you to do to help us get pumped up in the YouTube algorithm so more people see the wonderful content that we are putting out. Austin, as always, we start with what we call answers to the test. This is last week's winning Milli Maker lineup. And Austin, after a high of 262.1, we shot down for the Milli Maker this week to 178.3. I don't know the lowest total, but that is one of the lower totals. And when I was putting this lineup together, I was like, hey, I remember Austin said that name. Hey, I remember Austin said that name. Ryan said none of these names, folks. Let me just be very clear about that. So the winning lineup was Brock Purdy, Bijan Robinson, Austin Eckler, James Conner, a 3 running back lineup, which Austin told you could be viable, Calvin Ridley, Jauan Jennings, Noah Brown, George Kittle, and the Patriots defense. So Austin, I'm going to let you talk about the lineup, but if they tuned in last week, they already heard you talk about the lineup because your quarterback pick was Brock Purdy. Your favorite running back pick was Bijan Robinson, and your favorite tight end pick was George Kittle. So you straight up were like, these 3 guys need to be a part of your lineup. And that Purdy, George Kittle stack worked out really well for somebody last week.
Yeah, well, and let's also just throw out here, shout out to the Fantasy Points or Fantasy Labs for pointing us out. But Ricky Pearsall was cheaper than Jauan Jennings and actually scored more points than him. So
yeah, one more point if I remember correctly. Though with the bonus yards on DK, he might have a little bit more than 1 point. So
yeah, so
and you said Pearsall he's bringing this up because he told you to play Pearsall. We did not go with Jennings last week. So.
Yeah. No, it's cool to see this many hits in the lineup. But yeah, it was a weird week. It was one of those. I mean, 178 points for the Milli Maker. That tells you how bad it was elsewhere. Did not do great in cash, and it was a weird week where it was hard to hit the cash line, even though it was a low cash line. The thing I do want to just again, we got to say this. Like I feel like once every 3 weeks, so people don't forget that. The lowest roster percentage player in the Milli Maker winning lineup was Calvin Ridley at 3.8%. Like this lineup was not that different. There was a ton of players that were in the 15 to 20% rostership range, like Brock Purdy, 16%. That may have been the highest rostered quarterback on the slate.
Do you have it in front of you? How rostered was Noah Brown if it was more than 3%?
8.5%. Actually,
I don't know what I missed on Noah Brown last week. I clearly missed the edge there because he is not someone who crossed my mind. I know he's been really high on target share, but he was not one that crossed my mind. But clearly, what is that? 8% of 200,000. That's 16,000 people thought differently than I did.
So. Yeah, exactly. So it's just, again, it goes to show like you don't have to get that different. You don't have to feel like you need to pick some rando from fourth receiver from the Arizona Cardinals to win the Milli Maker. Sometimes you just got to pick the best plays and pivot in one or two places to get that edge.
Yeah, all you really have to do is score more points than everybody else in the contest, and they give you $1 million. It's crazy. If you guys can figure that out, it's going to work out really, really well for you. Austin, let me show some of my DFS ignorance here. I don't use Fantasy Labs or whatever it is you use. I just pull the lineup directly from DraftKings because I donate $20 to this contest every week. Next to this guy's name was a parentheses, and it said 38. Is that how many lineups he played total, or is that how many lineups he played this specific lineup? Do you have any idea what that might have meant on DraftKings?
Oh, I have no idea what that might have meant on DraftKings.
Okay, I didn't know
the player's name.
Yeah, it didn't have it. It didn't have it next to anybody else. I'll show you a screenshot of it, and we'll talk more about it on a different week. I was just trying to learn something about DFS, as I often do when I do shows with you. All right, guys, let's get into these cash plays. That was the tournament play. We always like to break that down and let you know that we did mention some of those guys the week before. So we kind of know what we're talking about, and I'm using we in the royal sense for Austin kind of knows what he's talking about. The first category we call top of the class. These are the expensive players, the $8,000 or higher plays. And Austin, it has been, I would wager 50 weeks since you've said this guy's name on our show.
50? Oh, yeah, 50. Yeah, that's a good one. I was like wait a minute, that's a lot of weeks, but that's almost a year, and that actually tracks. Yeah, Christian McCaffrey. Our man is back. He is 8,300 on DraftKings, 9,800 on FanDuel. So FanDuel went ahead and jacked his price up.
Yeah, they did.
It's Christian McCaffrey.
And we're moving on.
And I mean, that's honestly the truth. In his first game back, he had 19 touches. 6 of those were catches. So that's the other thing that's notable to me is like, you might look at his stat line and see 13 rushing attempts for 39 yards and think that's really bad efficiency, which it is. But he's got so much utilization in the pass game, especially when this was a close matchup. There's a good chance this is another close matchup with the Seattle Seahawks because they're coming out of a bye week and they've been pretty frisky on offense. So I think it's totally fine to go back to Christian McCaffrey, scoring 16 points in his first game out. I mean, we've seen many times in the past when McCaffrey is below 9K on DraftKings, you just play him and you figure it out elsewhere because he's that good.
I hope you don't mind me pointing this out to you. I've noticed this season that frisky has entered your lexicon and you're using it once per show, which I have no problem with. I love it. But what I did notice is Josh has now brought it into our Tuesday show. And I know that's because he does that show with you on Wednesdays. So you are bleeding into the vocabulary here at Club Fantasy. But no, you hit exactly where I wanted to hit with McCaffrey because I'm going to talk about Brock Purdy later, is that he didn't look great running the ball. And I'm sure he's going to at some point. but he's playing as a receiver. And for fantasy purposes, that just is better for this entire team. And
Yeah.
so it's why Brock Purdy finishes a game with 353 yards, which is not something we saw very often last season, because they could hand the ball to Christian McCaffrey 25 times and he ends the game with 175 yards. That doesn't feel like something they can or even are willing to do right now with him coming back from this Achilles tendonitis. So.
Yeah, and I think that's a key point, and that might scare people away from playing him a little bit in cash. But with the pass game usage, I'm still fine with it. And honestly, like, he did all of that last week and didn't even score a touchdown. And that is what Christian McCaffrey is known for. So I feel really good about him in cash this week. We can talk about it later, but I also feel good about him in tournament settings.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. People are going to be terrified. Obviously, you've done this with me long enough to know that I hate that price tag over on FanDuel, but the DraftKings price tag is pretty nice. Moving on to a much more affordable price tag. We call it band nerds. These are the guys who spend too much time with their instruments to be top of the class. These are the mid-tier priced players, $6,000 to $8,000. Austin, you got a running back and a wide receiver here for us.
Yeah, so first off, we'll go with Kareem Hunt, who is $6,700 on DraftKings and $8K on FanDuel. I think he's been consistently making this show recently, because he continues to get ridiculous volume. He has now gone 5 games in a row with at least 20 touches. Even last week, when you think, oh, the Kansas City Chiefs were down in the game, they weren't leading, right? Even though they've played close games, they've often been leading in their matchups. And so it's like, cool, let's just run the ball, slow the clock, slow the game down, and take our win and go on. They were behind last week, which was weird. And instead of just running up the clock with Kareem Hunt, they gave him 10 targets and 7 catches. Absolutely berserk. So he's going to be the running back who is utilized basically no matter what, whether they're leading or whether they're playing from behind. He ended up with 17 fantasy points last week on DraftKings, didn't even score a touchdown, which he's been doing a lot of in this offense because of that role. Buffalo, we know, has not done well against running backs this year, and it's getting a little cold. We'll see what the weather's like this weekend, but that plays well for a guy like Kareem Hunt. Maybe run the ball a lot, slow the game down some more. And even if this is a close shootout, which it could very well be, he's showing that he's going to be involved in the pass game. So regardless of the game script, I feel really good about Kareem Hunt. I also feel really good about Courtland Sutton, who is $5,900 on DraftKings and $6,800 on FanDuel. Now, he's not quite in that 6 to 8K range on DraftKings, so we're kind of cheating here because we needed to, we need to get creative, because honestly, there's not a ton of players on DraftKings in the 6 to 8K range that I'm like super thrilled about because I was able to find some value elsewhere. But Sutton has just continued to get kind of like mind-boggling volume from what we've seen from him in recent years. Like, he hasn't really been known to get the amount of volume that he's getting, but Bo Nix has finally figured out, oh, if I get the ball to Courtland Sutton, it makes me look good. So I'm going to give him 30 targets in 3 games. And that is the type of volume that feels really good, especially at $5,900 on DraftKings. The matchup is also good. They play my Atlanta Falcons this week. They have the ability to be gashed because they don't use AJ Terrell in a shadow situation. And even when they do, AJ Terrell has struggled at times recently. So I expect Courtland Sutton to be able to get a decent amount of catches. Even though he'll probably be the focal point of the Atlanta secondary, he should eat and have plenty of volume to hit and cash.
I was so excited for that game, and I still am. But the Broncos tend to take wide receiver ones away. So I thought this was going to be a rough game for Drake London. But man, did that just open things up for Darnell Mooney. And now they're saying an Achilles injury today. And it doesn't, nothing is coming out that it's a major Achilles injury, but I'm just tired of hearing Achilles at all right now. And the fantasy gods cannot take Darnell Mooney from us. He has been too good. This was such a well-deserved season. And I just thought he was going to eat this week, Austin. And I thought good Darnell Mooney was going to lead to Bo Nix and Courtland Sutton having to pass more. I'm fully with you on this game script. I just hope Darnell Mooney is healthy. Just a big fan of his right now. Going back to Kareem Hunt, one of the things I wanted to address with Kareem Hunt, Austin, he doesn't over the last 2 seasons, he's not catching a lot of passes anymore. And I thought that was strange. And when I was looking at the research on this game, Buffalo actually allows the most catches to running backs of all NFL teams this season. And a lot of that is the product of playing the Dolphins twice already. And the Dolphins just throw to Devon Achane the entire time. That's just what their offense is when Tua Tagovailoa is in. So that's hurt the Bills a little bit statistically. But is this a situation where square peg round hole? Do you think we've seen Hunt be a prolific pass catcher in the past as a running back? Do you think in a game like this where Buffalo seems to be able to be beaten by the running back through the air, maybe we could see him get more involved?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we just looked to last week where he was very involved, and that was somewhat of a game script situation. But it definitely can come back around in this matchup, especially because it's probably going to be a neutral to a negative game script for Kansas City. I definitely see it, and it isn't just this year that Buffalo has done that. It's been kind of a year-over-year trend for them. It's very common that they have been giving up catches to opposing running backs. So I think you're definitely right. I think even if Kansas City is ahead, there's a chance that they play the pass a little bit, play a little screen game. Like Kansas City's usually historically really good at the screen game, which can take advantage of Buffalo that way. So I definitely think it's a good possibility there.
Yeah, I hope so. I noticed the trend last year with Cleveland that they were not using him as a passing down back. They were using him as the running back and throwing to Jerome Ford. And Kansas City is just not really using a passing down back this year. And Samaje Perine actually caught a touchdown, if I remember correctly, 2 weeks ago. So it's been a weird one for the Chiefs. And as you mentioned, they were trailing for large bits of last game, which doesn't bode well for going into Buffalo. I'm a quasi Chiefs fan. I'm a huge fan of Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. I'd like to see them win this game. I would feel a lot better about it if it were in Kansas City. In Buffalo, I think they could struggle this week, which again could play out well for Hunt because they may be using those screens to get back into this game. So
Yeah, exactly.
looking at the bookworms, these are the $4,000 to $6,000 players. We say these are the easily underestimated folks in this DFS class for this week. Austin, it's funny, you have one name who made last week's list, and then my lineup is going to involve a lot of guys who made last week's list, but I think Jauan Jennings is a fine play. So.
Yeah, well, Jauan Jennings is a fine play, except for 2 hours ago from when we were recording this. It was announced that he's tending to an ankle injury. So he is going to be.
That one.
Yeah, it was, the only reason I saw it is because I have him on a fantasy team and I got the little sleeper notification that he's not questionable. But he was limited during Thursday practice due to an ankle injury. So this is one to track. The good thing is it's the 49ers, so there's a really easy pivot. But I do love Jauan Jennings because he actually got a ton of volume last week. So even though Ricky Pearsall outscored him in DraftKings scoring last week, that's really because Pearsall got into the end zone. Jauan Jennings had 10 targets last week, and so he was clearly the dominant wide receiver 2 in this offense. Obviously, if Jauan Jennings sits, I'm immediately pivoting to Ricky Pearsall, who is a 4K cheaper. The only reason that I'm not playing Pearsall and I'm playing Jennings instead is because I'm able to fit Jennings in my lineup because of where I'm able to find some salary savings elsewhere so far. But Ricky Pearsall is definitely a consideration. It's basically the cheapest receiver in the San Francisco 49ers receiver room.
Yeah, hearing Pearsall is cheaper and now this injury, it makes me want to think about changing my own lineup at the end of this because I could use that extra $400. Let me tell you, it was a weird week building lineups for me for this show, but we'll see how that goes. And then Austin, I promise you, I had your quarterback typed in as my favorite quarterback play. And I thought to myself, I think he's going to be a little too chalky this week, which is perfect for cash.
Yeah, well, you predicted well. And I almost put this guy in for the tournament section too, because I do think he's still a good tournament play, and that's Russell Wilson. He is $5,900 on DraftKings. He is $7,800 on FanDuel, so they definitely have him priced up a little bit more there. Overall, it's a killer matchup, and he's been playing well. They're playing the Baltimore Ravens, who just cannot defend the opposing pass games. They just got torched by Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, and yeah, obviously Russell Wilson and George Pickens are not Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, but the game script still stands that they're going to be likely playing from behind. If they're not, that's going to be wild, but that's a different story. likely playing from behind or close, and they're likely going to need to pass the ball. Russell Wilson's been playing really well. He's getting the ball down the field. So it's really just like a salary savings thing and a game environment situation. This is also the highest over-under on the slate. The only game this week with a higher over-under is the one that's happening as we're recording this, which is between Philadelphia and Washington. So I love the environment. Also, just for reference of how good of a matchup this is, since week 7, the Baltimore Ravens have allowed an average of 27.25 points per game in DraftKings scoring to opposing quarterbacks. That is absolutely bonkers, especially when you consider that's a 4-game sample size. Like sometimes you get 3-game sample sizes at this time of the year when I'm pulling these numbers because bye weeks and whatnot. No, the Ravens have played a full 4 games and they've allowed an average of 27 points to opposing quarterbacks. Surely Russell Wilson can get us a nice, neat 18 fantasy points to triple his salary.
Austin, as we point out often, your favorite picks in my streams of the week tend to line up. Russell Wilson is my stream of the week. Your next category is also my stream of the week. We'll get to that in a second. But while researching for Russ, I noticed what you noticed, what the Ravens have been giving up. And I pointed out, Russell Wilson isn't Joe Burrow, but Baker Mayfield and Jameis Winston both ate against the Ravens. I think Russell Wilson can be Baker Mayfield and Jameis Winston. No disrespect to Baker there because he's had a great season. But Russ has been cooking, and he seems to throw the perfect ball for George Pickens, which is what I love to see right now. So.
Yeah, exactly. And remember, that was Jameis Winston when we thought he saved the Cleveland Browns, and then he didn't save the Cleveland Browns.
Oh, what a long 3 weeks it's been. All right, moving on, Austin. We call it C's Get Degrees. These are the punt plays. It's almost always a tight end, and it is a tight end, and it's my stream of the week tight end. Talk to us.
That's incredible. This is Jonnu Smith week, apparently. I cannot believe I'm saying those words again. I think the last time I tried to play Jonnu Smith was when he was from the Falcons, and it really went sideways. He's been getting like weird volume in this game to the point that I think I played him in a showdown slate recently when Miami was in prime time because it was like, oh, wow. Jonnu Smith got 6 targets in 4 consecutive games. He got up to 8 targets in one of those games. Even last week, he had 4 targets, and you're like, oh, that's not that many. But he caught 3 of them for 45 yards. That's 7 fantasy points. And for a tight end, that's $3,800 on DraftKings. I will happily accept that. This also is actually a wildly incredible matchup. Frankly, I'm going to be honest here. I didn't double check this stat to make sure it's correct because I really should have because it blew my mind unless like something is broken in my model. Las Vegas has allowed an average of 28 points per game to the tight end position since week 7. That is dumb. Like, I don't know how that's happening. It's to the point that I'm like, something's probably broken here. But if you look at them over the season, they have allowed almost 16 points to the position. So it's not that unreasonable that they would have been worse to the point that they're pushing 20 or more points allowed a game to the tight end position over the past 4 weeks.
I just verified your numbers, and they are correct. Yeah, that's how much they're giving up. It's nuts. Because what I noticed about them is they've allowed the 5th most over the season and the most over their last 4 games to the position. And this is kind of where I like Jonnu. Jonnu's been doing this all with yardage. He only has 1 touchdown this season.
Yes. Yeah.
The Raiders are allowing a touchdown a game over their last 5 games. So it seems like Jonnu is likely to find the end zone. And then I have a game script theory. And this is something I've learned through DFS is tell yourself a story about the game. And my story is I felt like the usage for Tyreek Hill last week was kind of like a mixed bag. I didn't feel like they wanted to use him. I think the Dolphins can get ahead in this game and not have to force the ball to Tyreek Hill. And that's going to open things up for Jalen Waddle, Devon Achane, and then, of course, Jonnu Smith.
Yeah, I love that. I also, honestly, I could see even if they get ahead too, they keep passing the ball because they need to get a game to feel good about Miami again and be like, yes, look, this offense is good. We can roll. And everybody then will say, well, you did it against the Raiders. You need to do it against a real team, which is fair. But I do think regardless, they need that palate cleanser to feel good about themselves. And it could just benefit Jonnu Smith.
There you go. All right, guys, that is going to wrap up the cash portion of this game. And this is where I give you two important disclaimers. Number one, do not live off of Thursday's information. Austin drops an article every single Saturday strictly about his cash tournament plays or cash pick plays. And he has 48 more hours of up-to-date information. That's not to say what we're telling you isn't awesome information, but these guys can tear their ACL tomorrow, and then you don't want to play these guys. So check back to Austin's article. Don't live off of Thursday's information. Number two is if you want to play DFS with us, check the links in the description of this video, and you can get into our tournaments on both FanDuel and DraftKings. That's in the description of the video and in the intro of every one of Austin's articles. That is the end of cash for tonight. We are now going to move on to the tournament plays. If you're looking for a lottery ticket, these might be some of the guys you want to get into your lineup. Austin, I'm just going to announce both of our picks because they're from the same game. So 90% of why you like your guy is why I like my guy, and then I'll throw a little bit in. So we are picking from the same game for a very obvious reason. Austin likes Geno Smith. I like Brock Purdy. Austin, take it away.
Yeah, well, so the funny thing about this is when I was looking, I was like, who do I want to pick? I thought, oh, Brock Purdy. Let's go back to him. And then I saw you put Brock Purdy, and so I was like, this is a great time to talk about why it's also a great time to play Geno Smith.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great game environment.
It's an incredible game environment because, okay, the Detroit Lions have the highest implied team total on the slate. You should know because you probably want to get a Detroit Lion in your lineups. They are projected to score 30 points, which is wild. They are 14-point favorites over the Jaguars. But the second highest implied total on the slate is the 49ers at 27.25 points. This matchup should be really nice. It's a 48-point over-under. The spread's at 6.5 points, which I'm a little bit intrigued by saying somebody covers in that situation because it's a divisional matchup. The Seattle Seahawks are coming off a bye week. I think they're going to really push the 49ers. The 49ers defense hasn't been great this year. And so my thinking here is Brock Purdy's probably going to be the most rostered quarterback in tournaments because A, what he did last week, B, because it's a really good matchup and he's been playing really well. And so let's pivot. Let's have a lineup with Geno Smith at quarterback and stack him with one of his receivers. And then you could bring it back with Christian McCaffrey. You could bring it back with George Kittle if you want. I mean, you could bring it back with anybody. I like the idea of bringing it back with Christian McCaffrey because then what you're saying is the 49ers get ahead. Christian McCaffrey probably scored a touchdown or two to help that happen. And then Geno Smith is having to do some JSN magic like he did going into the bye week. And all of a sudden you have Geno Smith with 28 points and some receiver, probably JSN with 2 touchdowns and 200 yards. And you have a really nice base for your lineup. So it's really about the pivot. I think Brock Purdy or Geno Smith are great, but I think it's worth doing both. And last thing I'll say to this is loops back to the Milli Maker conversation we started with in answers to the test. But the person that played the Milli Maker or that won the Milli Maker last week, Max entered it, 150 entries. And so they were able to toy, which Ryan goes, damn, I'm competing against that with my one lottery ticket.
Exactly.
But because of that, they were able to try many different variations of a Brock Purdy based lineup. So they were able to have the one that got right with Jauan, Jennings, and George Kittle, and then also sprinkle in enough of the other guys to get him there.
Yeah, I don't know why I continue to donate the $20. It's fun to me. It is. It's a lottery where I have some say in what I'm doing, but clearly I'm not going to win until I have, 3,000 that I can put in there every week. And that's just not who I am as a person. Austin, I'm not going to lie. My heart sunk a little bit when you said that you think Brock Purdy is going to be the most rostered because that wasn't my expectation. I'll at least tell you why. You're probably right. But the first reason why I think he might be the second most rostered is Bo Nix. Bo Nix is $400 cheaper, and I think a lot of people are going to be in on that Atlanta-Denver matchup. So Bo Nix is the one that just maybe pours a little water on that. But the reason I liked Purdy, and he's my top-rated quarterback for the week, is he has the ability to match the elite production guys. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jordan Love are the higher price. They're all higher than he is. So for him, I'm getting a lot of bit of savings from Allen and Lamar Jackson. And I feel like I can get that same production. We mentioned, 353 yards last week. Seattle has given up big games before, and Seattle can match a big game. And you kind of hit the nail on the head. It's weird to call San Francisco a cover when they just beat a beat-up Tampa Bay team by 3 points, kind of luckily last week. They kind of got saved there. And so it's kind of hard to say that they're going to cover on this one. So I think this is going to be a fun back and forth game, which is why I like him. And then when you look at the numbers that Seattle has given up to quarterbacks, Matthew Stafford beat him for 19 DraftKings points. Josh Allen the week before 20. Kirk Cousins had a rough week against them, but Purdy has already beat them for 255 and 3 touchdowns this season. So there's history there that we know this could be a good game. And that was all without Christian McCaffrey. There is a name I want to throw at you, and I don't normally do this. I'm kind of putting you on the spot because he's not on the show sheet at all. How do we feel about a very cheap Anthony Richardson coming back this week against a not very good Jets defense? $5,300 for Anthony Richardson in his return to glory for the Indianapolis Colts. Any thoughts on him in tournament?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's viable. I'm not going to lean too heavily into it, but I definitely like when I was thinking about cash in particular, is because like Anthony Richardson, he's got the price, he's got the rushing upside, so like kind of intriguing from that perspective. I don't feel good about it enough in cash to go there, but I think it's a great tournament option because of what it's going to allow you to do with your roster elsewhere. And I think we'll get to this. I think I have a player. Yes, I do. I have a player in that team in that game that I'm interested in my tournament settings. So having Anthony Richardson maybe naked and then bring it back to the player from the Jets, I think is totally fine.
Okay, perfect. I'm glad we got into that. Yeah, I'm the only person on Football Guys who has him ranked right now, and I'm just like, this feels like that sneaky play that we should all be ranking, but now sometimes I feel like I'm out of it. So that's why I wanted to ask the question. Moving on to the running backs, Austin, I love every single name that we have on this list. If I could build a lineup with all three of these guys, I would, but I would have to go very, very cheap at every other position.
So. Yeah, it would be tough, but you could try it, see what happens.
Yeah.
Okay, so my first guy I'm going with is Devon Achane, and we talked about him a little bit in passing earlier. He gets a ton of pass volume. Speaking of passing, whenever Tua has been in the offense, he has consistently gotten at least 5 catches. He has 2 games with 7 catches, 2 games, and then 1 with 5, 6, and 8, respectively. He has 2 8-target games with 2 under center. Like, it is ridiculous how much he is utilized in the pass game whenever Tua is at quarterback. And he's coming off a down week. I think people might be disappointed if they played him either in redraft or in showdown against the Rams, but I'd look for a bounce back spot here. It's interesting because the Raiders have not been good against running backs in recent weeks. And if you're like me and they haven't been good across the year. They've been better against running backs in recent weeks. And if you're like me and you look at those recent week trends, you might be like, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't do this. And I shouldn't play Devon Achane. But I honestly am just willing to lean into it this week and say, you know what? I think that the Raiders have been faking it these past few weeks, and that their season-long trend is a better indication of who they are. And just to let's just talk that through for a second. So in recent weeks, they've played the Cincinnati Bengals, who don't really run the ball all that often. Like, they're really a pass-heavy team. They did have Chase Brown continuing to do stuff in that game. They played the Kansas City Chiefs, who only rushed for 82 yards, which their offense has been continued to be messy at times throughout the year. Plus, that was I believe that was on National Tight Ends Day. If my memory
that was the Bowers Kelsey game.
Yeah, and so it was like, oh, we want to pump everything through Kelsey. So maybe some skewed there from the narrative perspective. And then they also played the Los Angeles Rams. Also, by the way, they still lost to all of these teams, which is also why this data feels weird, because it's like, how have you been better against running backs recently but lost to these teams? And I think it's literally just that opposing running backs haven't scored touchdowns against them at the rate that they were earlier in the year. And so I'm going to kind of bet on their season-long trend holding out here with Devon Achane, plus the pass game volume is just too good to pass up.
I think it makes a ton of sense. I've looked into those Achane with Tua's stats, and he is just a different player. He's the best receiver on the team when Tua is playing. I think I saw you mentioned, 2 8-target games. The other 2 were 7-target games, if I remember correctly. So he has 30 targets in 4 games with Tua this season or something like that. It's nuts. So.
Yeah, it's absolutely wild. Another team or another running back I'm interested in this week is Derrick Henry.
How could you not be?
Yeah, how could you not be? In case you didn't know, he did not sign with the Dallas Cowboys this year. He signed with the Baltimore Ravens, who are 3.5-point favorites over the Pittsburgh Steelers. Baltimore has a 26-point implied team total. That's the fourth highest on the slate. I already talked about this game earlier. It's the second highest over-under. Throughout the entire weekend, it's the highest over-under on the slate. Here's my thinking about this. People, I think, are going to look at last week and think, oh, let's get that again. Let's get a lot of passing, a lot of Tylan Wallace and Rashad Bateman and all of these receivers, because we do think that Pittsburgh's going to be able to pass the ball well. What if Baltimore just runs the dang ball all game long and they're like, yeah, okay, you know how we're going to keep our defense from losing this game for us? We're going to keep them off the field. We're going to run the ball, slow it down, let Derrick Henry destroy the Pittsburgh Steelers' hopes and dreams, which, by the way, they have allowed the most points to the running back position since week 7, nearly 30 points per game to that position. We know when Derrick Henry gets going, he can have a 30, 40-point game performance. I think he could easily go overlooked this week, which also makes me very interested in him in tournaments.
Yeah, I think anytime you can fit Derrick Henry in a lineup this season, it just seems like it's the right decision. He scores touchdowns, plain and simple, and that just works in fantasy. And I don't want to say he's the entire offense, but it certainly still starts and finishes with him, which is incredible for a 30-year-old running back. You love to see it. So,
yeah.
At running back for me, Austin, you kind of already touched on the fact that you probably won a piece of this game. And so I'm going to take the running back for the team that is a 13-point favorite with a 30-point implied total. And I'm going to take David Montgomery here. And honestly, I love Gibbs and Montgomery. I think people are going to lean more towards Gibbs just because in a weird way, Montgomery has been disappointing as of late. And I say disappointing. He's hit double-digit fantasy points in 8 of 9 games this season. Each of his last 3 games, the game where he didn't hit it, he scored 8 fantasy points. His rushing output has really dipped since week 7, 30 yards, did have a 70-yard without a touchdown in week 9, and then 30 yards again this past week, but scores a touchdown. The fact of the matter is this: it's easy to point at some of these players who score a lot of touchdowns in bunches, Nick Westbrook-Akine, for example, and be like, that's got to have to stop because Nick Westbrook-Akine doesn't score touchdowns. David Montgomery scores touchdowns. That's what this offense is all about. It was Jamal Williams before him, and now he is in that role. I'm not worried about his touchdown production falling away, and now you have this game where they can just run the entire game. I think I saw a stat yesterday that it's like a perfect split between he and Jahmyr Gibbs on carries. Well, this is the kind of game where that split kind of is going to lean towards Montgomery because they don't need to run the smaller Jahmyr Gibbs and risk getting him hurt. Montgomery's still been mildly involved in the passing game. 1 catch last week for 24 yards on 2 targets. You want to see more of that, but the week before it was 3 catches. So I feel like there's enough for him to make him viable on DraftKings and certainly on FanDuel. On FanDuel, he's only $100 less than Gibbs. I think on DraftKings, he's like $400 or $500 less than Gibbs. A lot of this was about the fact that he is cheaper, but the other part of it is like this feels like the right game for David Montgomery to go off.
Yeah, I really like it. I looked at him as well in tournament settings for all of the reasons you described. I think people are going to lean towards Gibbs and David Montgomery. If he scores 2 touchdowns, like he's probably going to be outperforming Gibbs. People also forget he does actually get involved in the pass game. They may not need that in this game because they'll be ahead so much, right? Like, but they also may not need that from Jahmyr Gibbs this week because he'll be so far ahead. So I think I really do like the David Montgomery play.
Yeah, I'm hoping to see him get in the end zone twice, just to kind of correct the record, if you will. Folks, we break down every position for these tournament plays, and for wide receiver, Austin's going to give you 4 picks. The idea here is if you want to build a lineup out of Austin's picks, it's a good idea to do so, and you're able to do so. So Austin has 4 wide receivers for you now.
Yeah, so we're going to start. Let's actually start talking about someone in a matchup that I've already talked about. So we'll talk about Calvin Austin briefly. This is about correlating with Derrick Henry. I'm going to say that in this game, Baltimore is playing from ahead. Derrick Henry is scoring touchdowns, and Russell Wilson is having to throw the ball to keep up. And Baltimore has allowed the most points to receivers since week 7. The reason I'm going with Calvin Austin here, as you'll find out, is that there's some other expensive guys in my receiver room, so I need to save money. So I'm saving money with Calvin Austin, who's been fairly involved in this offense and in this receiver room and has the big play potential. So I like him from that perspective. Another running back receiver correlation I have going on here is with Garrett Wilson going up against Devon Achane. I really like this one. Actually, am I mixing up my games right now, or do I have the right game in my mind?
No, Jets are Indianapolis, because that's
Yes,
the one you
Jets
wanted
are
to talk about with
Indianapolis.
Anthony Richardson thing. So
Yes, that's right. I'm sorry. I was correlating the wrong people. So if you do play Anthony Richardson, I think you should bring it back with Garrett Wilson. The reason for this is the Indianapolis Colts have been getting gashed against opposing number one X receivers. And yes, Garrett Wilson is a guy that will make his way into the slot. We've been seeing a decent amount of slot work from him at about 35% of the time. However, he does also lead the New York Jets in snaps out wide. He has 265 snaps out wide. That's way more. It's also a way higher rate than what Devontae Adams has had. So Devontae Adams, he's been about 50-50 inside and out. Garrett Wilson, it's been 65% out wide, 35% in the slot. So with that in mind, I want to go towards Garrett Wilson because, again, the Colts have been getting gashed against opposing number one receivers in that role. So to me, that one's pretty straightforward. Some other guys I'm interested in, a couple of guys from the San Francisco Seattle matchup. Now, I'm building the lineup right now with Geno Smith as my quarterback in mind. And so I'm going to pick one of his receivers to stack with him. Right now, I'm thinking DK Metcalf because I think people are going to feel disappointed by him. They're going to pivot towards JSN because he's been more interesting and more exciting lately.
yeah.
But DK Metcalf, and also Metcalf has been injured. So people are going to be like, oh, what am I supposed to expect him coming off an injury? Well, he's also coming off a bye week, which is good for his recovery. And when they've been in close games or when they've been playing from behind, he's gotten peppered with targets many times. He has 3 games with 10 or more targets so far this season, all of which were either close games or games where they were losing, games in which they have been clearly ahead. He's gotten 6 or less, with the exception of the Atlanta Falcons game where he got 7. And weirdly, for some reason, he didn't get targeted when they played the Giants, which I need to look at and figure out why. But point being, they're probably going to be playing from behind and want to play through DK Metcalf to stay involved. And so I want some action with him in this matchup. Again, if you're playing multiple lineups, definitely have a JSN lineup as well. But I think if you're doing single entry, I'm going with DK Metcalf. And I'm bringing it back with Ricky Pearsall, which I was doing before we got the Jauan Jennings ankle injury news, because to me, Jauan Jennings is going to be a cash play. Ricky Pearsall is a good pivot in tournaments. Now, if Jauan Jennings ends up being out, I'm still probably going to play Ricky Pearsall just because of the salary. But then after that, I will, and then I'll just focus on getting different elsewhere.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Going back to the DK Metcalf thing and the volume, 11 targets against San Francisco last time, didn't get a lot of production out of it, but you know they're willing to go to him when he's healthy, and so that's what I'm very interested in. And I have about 10 minutes before I have to announce my pick. I'm trying to decide if I want to announce for the show, which is obviously just for bragging rights between me and you, if I want to announce Jennings or Pearsall. I think I'm going to end up pivoting into Pearsall, and then I just have some money left over for my wide receiver, Austin, and actually for my tight end as well. I think we're dealing with a little bye week fatigue where people seem to have forgotten. And a lot of times, Austin, I make my tournament pick based on some of the trends I'm seeing in redraft. And I was shocked that Cedric Tillman coming out of this Browns bye was still available in 50% of leagues. That tells me he's being undervalued by the greater fantasy community. And that's why I want to jump in on Tillman this week. Going into his bye before this Jamar Chase blow up while Cedric Tillman had the week off, Tillman went into his bye over his previous 3 weeks being the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy with 32 targets in 3 games. 81, 99, 75 yards. And then even when Jameis turned back into a pumpkin against the Chargers, Tillman still finished with 75 yards and a touchdown. He is the go-to receiver here. And then you go and look at a matchup against the New Orleans Saints. If you believe revenge game sentiment, you have the Jameis Winston revenge game, but then you have the Saints who are coming off of giving up 97 and 96 yards to Drake London and Darnell Mooney the week after they trade away Marcus Lattimore, their best corner. Obviously, they did well enough against the Carolina Panthers, but even Xavier Legette, 33 yards and a touchdown. Lad McConkey, 111 yards and 2 touchdowns. You get another, Broncos team who doesn't throw to their wide receiver a lot, so not a big game there, but still 50 yards out of Troy Franklin. Then Chris Godwin back in week 6 before he got hurt, 125 yards and 2 touchdowns. It sounds like the Saints are prime to give up 2 touchdowns. And if someone on this Browns team is going to score 2 touchdowns, it's Cedric Tillman. And then throw in the fact that specifically DraftKings, but even FanDuel hasn't respected him on price, 5,300, 6,400, less expensive than Jerry Jeudy on both sites. I don't understand what's going on here, but I'm going to take that savings every single time.
Yeah, I love Cedric Tillman this week. He's definitely in my cash pool. So I think you may be a little bit surprised at his rostership percentage. I think it will be a little bit different. He'll be treated differently in DFS than he is in redraft. But I think it's still worth it because of the salary savings. Like, I think it's chalk that you should feel comfortable eating in tournaments.
One of the things I've kind of picked up specifically from doing this show with you is the concept of there is good chalk that you need to eat. If I look at a guy like David Montgomery and like Cedric Tillman, and they feel likely to score 2 touchdowns, I'm going to put that in my lineup. I need that to win the $1 million, plain and simple. So if everybody else has it, guess what? We all move up. What is it? Rising tide lifts all ships. That's what I'm looking for there. And then Austin, I'm actually going to go first on tight end because I think there's a similar sentiment here for my tight end where I think there's a little, they didn't know what to expect of him coming off the bye week, and that's Tucker Kraft. Kraft has just been so involved in this Green Bay offense, and I think people seem to have forgotten that. And then it was an ugly game before the bye where Jordan Love was playing hurt and in the rain, and I don't expect either of those things against the Chicago Bears this week. Obviously, people are like quasi excited about the Bears because they fired their offensive coordinator, but the Bears' problems are still going to be their offensive line. They're still going to be, an offense is just not going to get things going. I think that's going to mean well for Green Bay. Austin Hooper, 64 yards against them last week. The week before, the Arizona tight ends combined for 69 yards. The week before that, the Washington tight ends combined for 99 yards. You can go back further and further. The Bears get beat by tight ends, and even Tucker Kraft in that terrible game, if I remember correctly, he's the one person whose stats I don't have up in front of me. I think he scored a touchdown because that was National Tight Ends Week. So even in that bad game, Tucker Kraft ended up scoring a touchdown, and I don't remember who they were playing. It was in the rain. Maybe it was Detroit. Regardless, it was a tough matchup for tight ends, and he still found the end zone. So the long and short is he's super affordable. When I look at the guys who could be the tight end 1 this week, he's the only one below like 5K. He's 44K on DK, 6,000 on FanDuel. He fits the lineup build that I'm kind of going for this week. And again, I think it's because coming out of his bye week, people kind of forgot how good he was going into his bye week.
Yeah, I think that's really, honestly, a really clever way to approach this. And I think it's a very interesting pick to have Tucker Kraft. I think, too, like, I love looking at teams coming out of the bye week because that's when I feel like they are most likely to buck their recent trends and to go a different direction than where people expect them to. People might expect this to be a tough week, unless they're Chicago Bears, because apparently they bucked their trend. It just was, they got way worse. And
yeah,
I think Green Bay is positioned to come out of the bye week swinging, and Tucker Kraft, to your point, has been a very important part of this offense and can help carry them towards a playoff run. And honestly, Chicago has been struggling against the tight end position recently, so the matchup's really good as well. You mentioned Austin Hooper, who really killed my cash tight end last week in Hunter Henry, but I'm going to call it good process, bad results.
I just want to quickly throw out, guess what? Hunter Henry was my stream of the week last week. So we both got killed on that one as well. You've pointed it out numerous times. There's always a parallel between some of your cash plays and my stream of the week. So
yeah, very similar process. But I'm going back to Hunter Henry, but this time in a tournament setting, because I think people are going to feel burned by him after last week. And the volume has been too consistent there throughout the year. He weirdly has a 12 target game on the season, but before last week, he was coming off a week with 8 targets, 6 targets, and 9 targets the 3 weeks before that. Drake May really seems to have a good chemistry with and like targeting Derrick Henry. They play the Rams now, who have been middling against tight ends. They've allowed the 11th most points to the position since week 7, but it's a decent game environment. A 4.5 point spread could be a little bit back and forth. So I'm going back for it because I'm hoping for some volume and a touchdown this week.
Now, I think it makes a ton of sense. The fact of the matter is, on teams with no established wide receiver 1, which is what we're still dealing with in New England, Hunter Henry and the tight end is always going to be a great option. And we're seeing Drake May get better. I don't want to say get better every week, but he seems to be playing more pro-ready football every single week. He's obviously having his mishaps, but a healthy Drake May, a healthy Hunter Henry should have no issue having a good week this week.
Yeah, no doubt.
Moving on to the defense, Austin, I was talking up Green Bay. I think we both went who's the cheapest in the room this week that we like, and you're going with the Chicago Bears, who have been an excellent fantasy defense. You always get worried about what the position their offense is going to put them in.
Yeah, so I think I had Chicago Bears either as my cash or a tournament play last week, and did not go super well against the New England Patriots. But I'm going back to the well because I am hoping for a little bit of hype coming out of some coaching staff transitions there. But also, it's really also about the matchup. Like Jordan Love has been throwing some weird turnovers this year. Maybe he fixes that coming out of the bye week. Maybe he doesn't though. And so if he does some weird pick six shenanigans, like Chicago could easily make this happen. They also just haven't really been getting blown out this year in general, and they haven't given up really bad defensive performances in terms of fantasy points. Most of the time, your defense is not really going to make or break your lineup, especially if you're playing in smaller field tournaments. So I like going after them this week, but I also honestly really like your defense, Ryan, to the point that I believe they will end up being my cash defense.
Yeah, and I like both defenses in this game, which is no surprise of the Saints and the Browns. So I think we're going to see an ugly game here, which is going to go great for fantasy defense. For my favorite pick, I'm going with the Browns. On one site, their prices are flipped. So on one site, the Browns are like $400 cheaper. I believe that's DraftKings, which is why I went with them here. And then on FanDuel, the Saints are $100 cheaper. So on FanDuel, I'm probably going to play the Saints this week. But the long and short of it is the Saints are scaring people off right now based on this wonderful game they had against Atlanta, which was pretty incredible. Not what you would have expected. So Atlanta and Carolina, the last 2 weeks have looked really bad against the Saints. But last week, the fired head coach, they're playing for their new special teams coordinator. Carolina never had a good defense. When you go back to the games before that, the Denver Broncos, the Los Angeles Chargers, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers all scored double-digit fantasy points in games against the New Orleans Saints. The Browns have a good defense. Right now, they're 20th in points, so that's going to scare people off. The Saints look like they've been shutting defenses down lately. That's going to scare people off. The Browns are, if I remember correctly, top 12 in sacks, top 15 in QB hits. They're getting after the quarterback. They're just not causing turnovers. Before, and obviously there were games where it wasn't Derek Carr at quarterback, but before this great span of games, they were averaging multiple turnovers per game. So I just think this is a Saints team that has no wide receivers. This is a Saints team that is getting worse on defense. I think the Browns are going to be able to come out of this bye rejuvenated, ready to get behind Jameis, ready to play the defense that's going to take for the Browns to win. And the other part of this, Austin, is while I love Cedric Tillman, the Saints also get gashed by running backs. Nick Chubb could keep this game low and slow on the ground where we're not going to see a lot of scoring. I feel like this could also be an old school Nick Chubb game. There's a lot of things working in the Browns' favor for this to be a good defensive matchup.
Yeah, I love the matchup here. And I think them coming out of a bye week is a part of that narrative. I think you're totally right. I feel good about them coming out and having something to prove and being ready to go on defense against a Saints offense that should not scare anybody.
Yeah. All right, guys. That's going to be the end of the show. Now, we don't just wrap it up right now. We do what we call the Valedictorian Shootout. Austin and I go head-to-head every single week. We announce Thursday lineups, which always ends up being a nightmare. And it was a nightmare again last week because we don't make changes to these lineups for he and I's game because we record the show on Thursday night and this is what we get. And sometimes it works in my favor. The last 3 weeks, it has not worked in my favor. So we were both bad last week, Austin, but you were a little bit not as bad as I was. You beat me by 20 points, 116-95 on our Thursday lineups. That brings you to 4-6. I think that's a 3-game winning streak. You are working your way back in this contest mightily. So Austin and I will each announce lineups. This is in DraftKings scoring. There's no money on the line. This is simply bragging rights for me to say I did better than Kelly did last year, which I think with my 4 wins, I already did better than Kelly. I'll love Kelly Singh. You know that. So for quarterback, Austin, I think we've honestly mentioned every player on my team except for one, and we even mentioned him in passing. I'm going Brock Purdy, David Montgomery, Devon Achane, Jauan Jennings, Cedric Tillman, Courtland Sutton. All have been mentioned on the show. I don't think we talked about Calvin Ridley. He's been so hyper involved in that offense in a PPR format. How could I not start him? 2 touchdowns again last week. The kid's been on fire when he's the only player on his team. I'm going to keep riding that, and he's also very affordable this week. Tucker Kraft and the Cleveland defense, except I am going to take the loss right now, and I'm going to go Pearsall instead of Jennings just to throw that out there for our lineup against each other. So.
All right. Well, definitely some overlap happening.
I figured there would be when I saw Austin. I made this joke last week. I love when I see your tournament picks and like 4 of them are my guys. So I was like, okay, at least I had a little bit of a process here, right? So
yeah, there you go. So I have Russell Wilson at quarterback right now at 5,900. We're going a 2 running back build this week with Christian McCaffrey at 8,300 and Kareem Punt at 6,700. This is where we start to get some overlap, although less so now that you pivoted to Pearsall. I have Jauan Jennings at 5,300, Jacoby Myers at 5,600, Cedric Tillman at 5,300, and Courtland Sutton at 5,900. Jonnu Smith is my tight end at 3,800, and I also have the Cleveland Browns defense at 2,600.
Well, there we go. So, yeah, this one's going to come down to quarterbacks and running backs, it looks like. So that'll be a fun one. Normally, one of us runs away with those positions. So it'll be real interesting to see how it goes. And as I mentioned, this is just for me and Austin, but we do have a tournament every week that you guys can play with us. So make sure you join the class. You will find the links in the description of this video to play with us on DraftKings and FanDuel. And FanDuel, we just run the main slate. On DraftKings, we run every slate. We have a Thursday slate going on as we record this show. We do the Monday night slate. We do every single slate over there, a little $2 contest, just fun for bragging rights. And last week, Guju Man, who has played with us for a while, 3rd win all time. I think 1st win this season, took down the DraftKings 133-7-2. And on FanDuel, I think it's just ERTLT. I don't know how to pronounce it. 2nd win this season, 122-42. Guys, that is the end of the show. If you'd like to hear your name announced, make sure you join those contests. Austin, please everybody know where they can find your work and what you do here at Club Fantasy.
Yeah, so you can catch me doing DFS content 3 times a week. First on Thursdays with Oh Captain My Captain, where Josh Hudson and I break down the Thursday night showdown slate and help you take down those tournaments. And then every Friday, you get me and Ryan here talking cash and tournaments for the main slate on the DFS Academy. And then on Saturday, my most up-to-date, most current information will be my cash article, the A-list, that I write Friday night. So it's after those injury reports have come in. Make sure to check it out. It's going to be the most up-to-date. Sometimes I change players from this show depending on information we've got. And I definitely will give you enough players to fill a full lineup because I don't do that during the cash portion of this show.
There you go. Guys, Club Fantasy goes live 5 days a week. We do shows 6 days a week. This is actually our only show that comes out on Friday, and it's a pre-record. However, we are always ready to answer your questions. Every Saturday, we run a show from 11 to noon called Start Sit Different Day, where all we do is answer your questions, including DFS questions if you guys want to drop them in there. So make sure you guys are looking out for that show. If you have any questions that we can help you with, we're live for an hour, no show sheet, just answering your questions. And then every Sunday, again, if you have DFS questions, Austin is always heavily active in this. We put a tweet out where you guys can just drop your questions into the tweet thread and all of Club Fantasy's writers jump in there and answer those questions for you. We literally cover everything DFS, Dynasty, and a lot of redraft, obviously, right now. There's no reason for you guys not to hit that subscribe button. Do it. Save us some time, save you some time. I don't have to yell at you every week, though I'm going to yell at you every week. For Austin, I'm Ryan. That is the Week 11 DFS Academy. Hope to see you guys back next week. Good luck building lineups. Have a good one.